Chapter 27. A Rose Season Without You. Night had fallen by the time Matias finished bathing and stepped out of the bathroom. Tying the belt of his robe loosely around his waist, he leaned against the frame of the open window that looked down onto the garden. Compared to the beautiful garden and forest on the sprawling land of the renowned Arvis estate, this mansion's garden was more modest. Since the mansion was located in the middle of the city, the garden was naturally smaller, and neither Matias nor any of the previous dukes had been particularly interested in landscaping. Thus, the Rat's mansion's garden was simple, in keeping with the simple architecture and decor of the mansion itself. However, each year when the rose season arrived, a large quantity of roses were transported from Arvis to the Rat's mansion's garden, temporarily transforming the small garden into a spectacular sight to see. A passing breeze carried the scent of the roses up to Matias's room, and he thought about the upcoming summer break when he would return to Arvis. While thinking of this, his mind suddenly drifted to thoughts of Leila helping the gardener with various tasks throughout each summer day. He frowned. She always smelled like roses. Like the roses that the master gardener plants, the most beautiful roses in the world. Little had Matias expected that his downfall would come from something raised by the gardener. Leila, a girl who was nothing. What's in a name? He closed the window and turned around. His wet hair dripped on his feet. It seems that things have turned out rather well for her. Normally a girl like her wouldn't dream of being able to marry a doctor's son. Thanks to Kyle Ettman's foolish love, she's going to become Mrs. Ettman, and will even attend college here in the capital. She's remarkably lucky.
Leila,
he whispered to himself. If that beautiful nuisance were to disappear from his sight, it would benefit him as well. For this reason, he should have been in full support of her marriage. However, even after closing the window, the scent of roses still lingered in his nose. After a moment, he realized that this was because there was a vase of roses on the credenza in his room. They looked to be roses from the garden. He turned away from the vase to look at the golden birdcage in another corner of the room, before turning back to the vase.
Leila.
Speaking the name at full volume, it sounded even sweeter to his ears. It's rose season, but you're not here. Still lost in reminiscence, he reached out and grabbed the roses from the vase. They were a pale shade of pink, just like the color of Leila's cheeks when she was crying. He gripped the roses tighter, crushing them. It is good that things have turned out this way, he thought. He wanted to believe this, but... His eyes slowly narrowed. Can there really be a rose season without you? I always return to Arvis when the roses are in bloom. Could it really be that you won't be there? The doubts that followed these thoughts led him to an unexpected realization, that she had always been there in the garden during the summers when the roses were in full bloom. It was like she was a part of Arvis, which also meant that she was his. Having torn the roses out of the vase and crushed them, he couldn't bring himself to throw them aside. Just then, his bird started singing. At the same moment, for the first time in his life, he felt the desire to kill someone. This desire felt clear as day to him. What wasn't clear, however, was who it was directed towards, the doctor's son, or her. By the time he let go of the mushy handful of crushed rose heads, the night had grown fully dark. His rose-scented hands then picked up a document from the table and tore it in half. It was an application for a 1-year extension of his military service.
I approve,
Bill finally said, with great confidence after hesitating for a long time. Leila was looking at him from across the table with a puzzled look on her face.
Of that rascal Kyle, I mean. I approve of him wholeheartedly. He has my full support.
Uncle Bill,
Leila whined, frowning. Bill didn't stop.
Why don't you accept his proposal already? Marry him and you two can go to college together. I really want that for you, Leila.
I can't.
Don't you love him?
Sure, but it wouldn't make any sense for me to marry him.
What do you mean it wouldn't make any sense? What doesn't make sense about two people who love each other getting married?
Bill was starting to get worked up. Leila's eyes remained calm.
If I married Kyle, he and his family would be a laughingstock in society.
Dr. Edmund himself has approved the marriage.
But
Leila, clear your mind of all these random thoughts and look into your heart.
Bill was speaking louder now.
If you love Kyle, marry him. If you don't, then don't. It's really as simple as that.
Leila remained silent for a moment, then lifted the beer glass in front of her and took a big swig, just as Bill had expected. She had grown up to become a great drinker. They were now drinking buddies who regularly chatted over beers.
I love Kyle,
she said, wiping the beer foam from the side of her mouth.
I doubt I'll ever have another friend as warm and kind as him.
She looked at Bill with a more serious expression.
So I don't want to embarrass him.
What are you saying? Where'd you get this low opinion of yourself, Leila?
It's not like that. I like myself how I am, Uncle Bill. I'm not ashamed of myself, no matter what people say about me, and I'm working hard to become an outstanding adult, just like you want.
She furrowed her brow. She had a pensive look in her eyes.
But I don't know anything about marriage, Uncle Bill. For all I know, if I got married, all my efforts to become an outstanding adult would go to waste.
Bill chuckled.
Don't tell me you're planning to live your whole life in this cottage with an old widower, Leila.
I want to. I never want to leave Arvis's forest, and I never want to leave you.
That's a terrible thing to say, Leila.
Now that I have my teaching certificate, I want to get a job at a school nearby, and I want to keep living like this forever. Right here with you, Uncle Bill, and now I'll be able to help you too.
Where's the forest going to go? Nowhere. It's going to stay right here forever, as am I. Sure, eventually I'll grow too old and weak to continue working as a gardener, and I'll have to leave. But I'm still strong and healthy. I bet I still have well over a decade of work left in me.
He took a couple of gulps of his beer.
No matter where you go or what you do, even if you get married, even if you go to college, you'll always be my little Leila.
He reached across the table and squeezed Leila's little hand. The college entrance exam was coming up very soon, but Leila had been showing no signs of changing her mind. Bill was worried about this so much that he had arranged for them to have this chat.
If you marry into the Edmund family, we'll be neighbors. What could be better than that?
Uncle Bill.
And Leila, it's rare to meet a man who you can be sure would make a good husband and a good father. But Kyle is just such a man.
He smiled and patted the back of her hand.
Think about it. Think about how great it would be to marry that wonderful guy and start a real family with him. Your house would be filled with the sound of your children's laughter, and Kyle will keep you from ever being lonely.
We're a real family, aren't we?
She asked, stroking his fingers. She looked up at him. Her eyes were moist.
You and I are a family, Uncle Bill. A real family.
Well...
Now Bill was tearing up as well. Why is she always making me cry?
If you think we're a real family, that should be all the more reason for you to listen to what I say.
He placed an envelope in front of her that he had prepared in advance. She picked it up and opened it, and her eyes went wide. It contained a train ticket to Rats, and some money to cover travel expenses.
The test is next week, so you better start studying hard first thing tomorrow. I know you always work hard, but if you want to pass this test, you'll have to step it up a notch. If you don't go to Rats, it means you think of us as a fake family.
Uncle Bill.
And if you don't take the entrance exam, I'm not going to see you again, Leila.
He let go of her hand, and straightening his shoulders, looked at her sternly. Nonetheless, there was a limitless tenderness behind the sternness. Holding the envelope in her hands, she sank into thought. He looked at her with a deep gaze. She looked just as bright and lovely as when he had first met her. Soon, she seemed to have made up her mind. With a solemn expression on her face, she lifted her beer glass and held it out towards him, just like she had done with her apple juice when she was a little girl. Bill readily lifted his glass and clinked it against hers. She downed the glass in an instant. Soon her cheeks would flush, but for time being, she was doing a good job imitating an experienced drinker.
If I were to fail the test, we'd still be a real family, right?
She asked with glistening eyes. This question almost brought him to tears again.
I'll have to think about that,
he bluntly replied, before flashing a tender smile at her. She smiled warmly back at him, just as members of a real family do.
Yeah, I think you'll like that place most of all. The Natural History Museum.
Kyle confidently asserted.
It'll be like heaven to you.
He had been reciting a list of all the must-see places in Rats, and had gotten most excited when it came time to talk about the Natural History Museum. Flowery spring scenery was visible out the window as the train chugged along. This was Leila's first time visiting Rats, but Kyle had been there many times to visit family, so he knew the capital city well. He had suggested that she stay with him at his relative's house, but she had opted to stay in a nearby hotel instead.
You'll probably be too tired to go today, so how about tomorrow?
He asked.
I've got to study for the test.
What good will it do to study now when the test is right around the corner? You've already studied plenty in advance.
Wow, you're certainly full of confidence, Mr. Atman.
But of course, Miss Llewellyn.
Impressive.
That's why you should marry me.
Of course. Why didn't I expect him to say that today like he does every other day? Rather than verbally rejecting him this time, she just stared intently into his eyes. He squirmed at her unexpected reaction.
What's the matter?
Kyle, can you picture it?
Picture what?
The two of us as husband and wife?
Her expression grew solemn, while he started to blush.
Of course I can. I can picture it. Easily.
He replied.
I don't know. Seems a little weird to me. The thought of us getting married, having kids and all that.
What do you mean? It doesn't seem weird to me at all.
Really? The thought of us engaging in reproductive behavior to create a child? Bearing that child and raising it? That doesn't seem weird to you?
Reproduct? Huh?
He couldn't believe his ears. Certain that he had misheard her, he just stared. Leila looked right back at him with an innocent expression and dropped the bomb once more.
Reproductive behavior? It's nothing to be embarrassed about, Kyle. It's a natural function that all sorts of living things, including birds and flowers, take part in to preserve their species.
Do you really understand the words that are coming out of your mouth right now?
Sure. I'm not great at geometry, but I do well in other subjects,
she replied, smiling proudly. Kyle was now feeling quite flustered.
So yeah, Kyle, I just think it's weird to think about us doing that kind of thing and,
Here, Leila, eat this,
Kyle said, sticking a sandwich half into Leila's mouth to shut her up. It wasn't yet summer, but inside the train, it felt as hot as an oven. Leila chewed and swallowed the sandwich, then opened her mouth to begin talking again. Before she could, however, Kyle put a cookie into her mouth.
Eat this too.
Please don't talk about that stuff anymore, he thought, shaking his head. The words Bill had said to him that morning, when he had come to pick up Leila, flashed into his mind.
If you get any funny ideas, think of my shovel.
Bill's smile as he said this had been kind, yet somehow ominous. Kyle pictured the huge dirt-covered shovel, which looked almost like a weapon in Bill's hand.
So Kyle, what I'm saying is,
Leila said, having finished the cookie. The cookie crumbs on her lips made them look even more adorable than usual.
Leila, if you say one more word,
Kyle muttered, clutching his head.
Huh?
If you say one more word,
he repeated, thinking of Bill's shovel.
I'm going to jump off the train.
AudiosKoppo.